Now we know about distribution setup, right? Distribution setup in a sense, communication between two queue managers, correct?
Yes.
Imagine if there is a requirement of communication between 4 to 5 queue managers. Total, how many definitions required from? Let me draw the diagram completely, you'll understand. This is queue manager 1. This is queue manager 2. This is queue manager 3. Hey, hi, Nandada. Welcome to the session. So today's topic is cluster. So imagine when we are trying to do setup between two queue managers, QMGR1 and QMGR2, how many channels we required here? One sender, correct? One receiver. Okay. Which is pointing to, for example, if your communication from queue manager 1 to 2 means here, and receiver means here. Here is SDR2 and RCVR2. So now, if you want to make communication from QMGR1 to 2, you need two channels. You need one channel in sender, one channel in receiver. And if you want to make communication from QMGR2 to QMGR1, here you need one sender and one receiver. Okay. Okay, let me put this way. Sender is going to receiver, correct? Now this sender is going to connect to this receiver, correct? Now if you want to make a communication between two queue managers, total how many definitions we need? Total 4 definitions we need, correct? Imagine if the communication has to happen between 5 queue managers. How many we need? Again from QMGR1 to, if you want to make communication to QMGR3, again from QMGR3 to QMGR1, again you need here one separate SDR3 is required, RCVR3 is required. Vice versa communication if you want to make. Like that here, if you want to send SDR3, RCVR3. SDR4, RCVR4. Now, if this queue manager wants to connect to this here, you have one sender, one receiver. If this queue manager, again sender, you need a new sender, you need again to communicate to queue manager 3. So sender 3 is required. Again QM1 to QM4, again SDR4 is required here. So like this, if you want to make a communication between multiple queue managers, your number of definitions will increase. QM1 to QM2, one sender, QM1 to QM3, another sender, QM1 to QM4, another sender. Then every queue manager will need how many definitions we need? 3 definitions here. And for example, vice versa, if you think 3 definitions here, 3 here, and 3 here. Then totally how many it is? 4, 3, 12 senders, 12 receiver. And so it means what is your total number of channels required? Total 24, correct? I don't want this kind of a setup here. I want a cluster setup. When I say cluster setup, the channel, all the queue managers are part of a one particular cluster, and we have a concept which is a full repository and which is a partial repository. Full repository means which maintains the all the cluster repository information. We have something called full repository, partial repository. Each and every cluster, as per the IBM standards, needs minimum 2 full repository. Okay. Minimum 2 full repository is required. Why 2 full repository is required? Because if one full repository something goes wrong, then the other full repository can take the control. Why this is not coming? You understand, right? What I'm trying to say here. If it is a distribution setup, you need more number of definitions.
Yeah.
For example, now if you want to make the same communication between cluster, okay, once you created a cluster, you have Q manager A, you have Q manager B, you have Q manager C, you have Q manager D. Now here we are planning for 2 full repository queue managers. Now this is QMGR A, which is full repository. Now this is QMGRB. This is again a full repository. When I say full repository means it's like a main stuff. What will happen here is all these partial repository queries. Okay. Why sometimes this diagram will not support? All these partial repository key managers.
Sorry, please.
No, I can't hear you. You said something.
No. Please carry on. Sir, unfortunately, it's unmuted.
Okay. Okay, now it is coming. Now all these partial repository key managers will connect to one key manager. Okay. Now this queue manager A, imagine if this is a full repository key manager, all the other queue managers which are a partial repository key managers will sharing the information to this. Now, if there is a requirement for queue manager A for this queue manager and this queue manager, they no need to connect directly. They can go to full repository queue manager, and full repository queue manager will help them to where the information to pass on. That's like a which is maintaining a cluster repository information. When you say cluster, when you keep any queue manager which is part of a cluster, then the full repository queue manager will help to create a fly channels whenever they required. It means there is no concept of remote queue in cluster at all. Okay. Queue manager AC, I can say, which is a cluster part. Queue manager BC, which is again a cluster part. QMGR CC, part of cluster. QMGR DC. When I say added C here, which is part of cluster, this is a full repository, and this is also a full repository. If something goes wrong with this full repository queue manager, the entire traffic will be taken care by this queue manager B. So the active full repository queue manager will be only one. If something goes wrong with this information for the queue manager A repository or anything wrong with this queue manager, the entire traffic will be handled by queue manager B. The entire connectivity from A to AC to CC, AC to BC, AC to DC, everything will be maintained here. Are you guys getting me, or am I confusing you, or how this?
Sorry, could you please come again?
See, normally in your distribution setup, from queue manager A to queue manager B, if you want to do a setup, in a source side, you need one sender, one receiver, and destination side, you need one sender, one receiver. Correct?
Yes. Yes.
Then total, how many channels required? 4 channels required.
4.
If imagine if it is a 4 queue managers are there. This queue manager has to connect to AC, has to connect to BC, AC has to connect to CC, AC has to connect to DC. Then how many sender channels required at AC? 3 sender, correct?
Oh.
When I need 3 sender, at the same time I need 3 receiver also, correct?
Receiver as well, yes.
3 sender and 3 receiver. Then tell me totally how many channels you required here? 6 channels, correct?
336.
Correct, huh?
Yeah, 6.
6 channels you required at each queue manager. In the same way,
Yeah.
if you go on here, if you keep here also you need 6. Here also you need 6.
Yes.
Here also you need 6. Now total, tell me how many.
Yeah. 6 was that one.
So 6 4 ja 24 channels are there, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
This you required at 24 channels at distribution setup. Now, if you need the same setup of the 4 queue managers, how many channels we required in cluster? That is the question. Imagine if these 4 queue managers are part of a cluster, what it need? One cluster sender, one cluster receiver for each queue manager. That's it. AC required one sender, one receiver. BC required again 2. PC required 2. This required 2. Now here total how many channels it has become?
It's total 4. It's total 4.
No. Each queue manager need two channels. Queue manager AC needed two channels. Queue manager BC, queue manager CC, and DC. So 4 2 are 8 channels.
8.
So whereas in your distribution setup you need how many? 24. Now whereas in cluster you need how many in total? 8. Now how this communication going to happen with only 8 channels, which is part of 4 cluster? How this setup going to work? That's what we are going to see now. Okay, you're getting my point? If you want to make a communication between 4 queue managers in the distribution setup individually, you need in total 24 channels. Where if you want to make the communication between 4 queue managers in cluster, you just need 8 channels, which means each sender need 1 channel, each receiver needs 1 channel. That's it. Rest of the channels, cluster will take care of it automatically. So there's a lot of difference between 24 and 8, correct? Number of definitions will be reduced. You guys are getting me?
Yeah. Okay.
Do you want me to put one more diagram, or we can go with the commands? See, this is a separate notepad for which will help you for setting up the cluster concept. See, let's go through to understand how to convert a queue manager into a full repository. You no need to do a separate action. You just need to alter a repos attribute. Decide which queue manager you want as a full repository, and give the name. And this alpha name will act as a cluster. Whenever you create any center channel like this, see if you put the name here, whenever you create any name of the channel, in the last you will give cluster of cluster name, means that cluster, that channel is part of this cluster. You just need to understand. I'll show you in a command prompt. See, by default, it is a blank. When I say, if you see anything in the queue manager, if you see this attribute blank, means that queue manager is a partial repository queue manager. Okay. Now, this is not part of a cluster. This is part of all or part of distribution setup. Now we have to create a new, sorry. Now we have to create a setup for cluster. So just 5 minutes, we'll give a walkthrough for the commands. Then what we need to do? We just need to execute the commands. That's it. Whenever you want to convert any queue manager into full repository, you just have to alter the queue manager repos attribute. Go ahead and create a cluster center channel, cluster receiver channel in all the queue managers. Go ahead and create the listener in all the queue managers. Start the listener in all the queue managers. Execute refresh cluster. The way we did for SSL, right? Refresh security type SSL. If you remember, in authorization also we have given like that. The same way we have to execute. Now, when you create a queue manager, you first have to decide what is the queue manager name, what is the port you want to give, what is the listener, and you have to start the listener. Remember one thing, you are not supposed to start a listener unless your channels are ready, first of all. Can you give a walkthrough here? The definition of creation of center channel type, TRP type, con name, everything is the same as per the distribution setup. Just the name will be different here, will be added. What it is added? Cluster in bracket alpha, which means you are working on this alpha cluster. You getting my point? 2.QMGRB. If you are in QManager A, if you are pointing to QManager B, then imagine A and B are your full repository and C and D are a partial repository. Whenever you are pointing to QManager B, it's a sender channel. If you want to create a receiver channel for itself, then we have to point to the same QManager name. The connection going sender, cluster sender will be pointing to opposite side QManager. When you create a receiver channel in cluster, this cluster receiver channel will point to its own QManager. This is the logic here. You have to remember this. That's it. Like that, first we have to figure it out. Now I'm going to frame the commands here. I don't want to disturb the existing notepad. Tell me what name you want to create. First, we'll decide. QMGR A1, QMGR B2, QMGR C3, QMGR D4. Okay. So these are the queue managers I want to create. And remember one thing. In your laptop, you just need to check what is the ports that you are using. You cannot use the same port again. So I'm using a unique port here, 1425, 1426, 1427, 1428. So, okay, 1428. So I am deciding which queue managers want to be a full repository. I want, as per the IBM standard, I want full repository as a 2 queue managers. Now this queue manager, I won't take any action, which means this is a partial repository queue manager. Okay. Now, once your queue manager is created, you know how to create a queue manager. Now, what is your first step you have to take? Step 1. Convert the queue manager into full repository, correct? Then what is the command? Alter QMGR repos. And what is the name of the cluster would you like to give? Any name would you guys like to students? MQ students. Okay. By giving this command, you are going to convert the queue manager into a what? Full repository, correct? Are you guys with me?
Yes, sir.
So this step we have to do for 2 queue managers, which we have decided for QMGR A1 and QMGR B2. Correct? Why? Because we have decided above the QMGR A1 and B2 are the full repository. Why we are entirely worrying about this concept is the main agenda is the number of definitions will be reduced. MQ administration task will be reduced. In your distribution setup, there is a lot of confusion, a lot of channels required. Imagine if it is a 4 queue managers, you need 24 channels. Imagine if it is a cluster of, for example, if you have a cluster of 50 key managers. How many channels you need? One channel need a 49 sender channels to communicate to other 49 key managers, correct? And at the same time to receive request from them, again those many receiver channels. So 49 plus 49, it's almost 98 channels you require each and every key manager, which is practically not possible to remember. So in the same, that's why we are avoiding and we are coming to the cluster. What you just need to copy from this is just the syntax of cluster sender and cluster receiver. Once you are clear on the steps of Notepad, then everything will be easy. So what is our key manager name? A1. What is our full repository port number? 1425. Create a listener, it is saying, then I am going to create a LSN.QMGRA1. Define listener. Defining listener. So I am not going to start immediately the listener. I'm just removing this command. What is the name of our cluster? MQSTUDENTS. When you decided cluster sender channel, if we are talking about QMGR A1 has to point to B2. So here I have to give B2. So what is the B port number? 1426, correct? What is our cluster name? MQSTUDENTS. This is not required. Now, this is a QMGR A1. All the receiver channels will pointing to itself. So here the name is QMGR A1. Now channel type is cluster receiver. Conname. What is the port number of A1? 1425, right? A1 port number. Correct. A1 is pointing to itself. So I have to give A1 1425. Now this is the way you have to define the channel. Since the meeting is going to end in another 10 minutes, I'm stopping the recording. Let me